gentlemen, and everyone at Abu Dhabi Book Fair. It's a pleasure for me to moderate this session. I'm Suha Oda, the moderator of this session. It says, today a reader, tomorrow is a leader. Between the challenge of balancing a desire to raise young readers' realization while seeking to create vibrant reading communities of readers within and beyond school at the same time. Many countries are aware of the bidirectional relationship between reading attainment and positive attitudes to reading, are now paying increased attention to the concepts of reader engagement and reading for pleasure in both policy and practice. This special issue brings into the spotlight the importance of reading for pleasure with our speakers tonight, who will take us into the world of reading for pleasure, sharing their passion for books and reading. And let me welcome on the stage Isabel Abul Hall, OPE, COO and Trustee, Emirates Literature Foundation, who founded Magrudi's, a bookshop chain, and also founder of the Emirates Airline Festival of Literature, the Middle East's largest celebration of the written and spoken word. On the screen, welcome with me Professor Rana Dajani. Professor Rana Dajani is a molecular cell biology, Hashmet University, Jordan, Harvard Radcliffe Fellow, a Fulbright Eisenhower Fellow, Yale and Cambridge visiting professor. She also developed a community-based model, We Love Reading, to encourage children to read for pleasure. Welcome, Professor. And also we have on stage Dr. Ahmed Al-Shuaibi, who obtained his PhD in chemical engineering from Colorado School of Mines. The Tales of Hamad was Dr. Al-Shuaibi's first attempt in creative writing, which was followed by the Tales of Aisha. He established also Arawi Publishing and Book Trading, which focuses on preserving Emirati culture to our children now as it once was. Welcome, everyone, and welcome to the session. And let me start with you, Professor Rana, and start with the question, how reading can help in improving our mindset?
Thank you very much for inviting me to be part of this panel. This is a very exciting moment, I think, in our lives, not just in the Arab region, but all over the globe, as we come out of the COVID-19 pandemic crisis. Reading changes mindsets. That's our motto. And that happens when you are reading for fun, reading for pleasure. Because when you're reading for fun and reading your pleasure, that is intrinsic to how your brain evolved as a human being. And this is based on biology, because as the child's brain is growing, the neurons are making connections with each other. And if a child is being read to by a caregiver, a mother or a father, who is enjoying the experience of reading for fun with his or her child, there becomes an association in the brain of the child of the feeling of security and happiness that is connected with reading, that stays with the child when he or she grows up. So when they're sad, they want to read. When they're happy, they want to read. And therefore, those critical pathways of pleasure are connected to reading, and those critical pathways of curiosity and seeking answers and enjoying the ambiguity and being comfortable with change is what allows the child to grow up, to have a mindset that is flexible, that celebrates diversity and embraces the world to become more innovative. And hence, reading for pleasure changes mindsets to create change makers.
Thank you. Thank you. We'll get back to that soon. Isabel, I have a question for both of my speakers here on stage, actually. In 2016, Sheikh Khalifa bin Zayed Al Nahyan issued the National Law of Reading, and we also have a month of reading every March. How can governments and local communities promote and build culture of reading?
Sorry, that's a really good question, Soha. The reading law and having a month of reading really focuses our attention on why reading is so important. And Dr. Ahmed and I were on a panel together at Khalifa University talking about reading for pleasure. And also in March, I was with Professor Rana talking about reading for pleasure in March during the month of reading. But how can governments government employees, government institutions, how can they really make a change? Well, I am completely with Professor Runner about the importance of reading for pleasure with love. And where is love? At home. And so if they can really have TV programs, television programs showing families where little babies are cuddled on their parents' knees, there's a book, they're chewing it, they're pointing at things, they're having laughter, they're turning the pages, they're looking at the illustrations. This then, as you said about the neurons, the scientific evidence of how reading for pleasure is embedded in our brains. And when we see a book, Dr. Ahmed and I were talking a minute ago and said, it's like coming home when we come to the book fair because we're surrounded by books, so we feel happy. Immediately our neurons are saying, oh, happiness, there are so many books here. I grew up in a house with books. I grew up with parents who loved reading, and consequently, I couldn't escape this pandemic of reading for pleasure. I had no way out. And then I infected my 5 children, and they have infected my 7 grandchildren. We all love reading, and we love it with holding close and sharing stories.
Thank you, Isabel. Dr. Ahmed?
Thank you. So first of all, I want to reiterate how pleasured and honored I am to be here, and I agree totally. It feels like walking in here, because we missed Abu Dhabi International Book Fair last year, so walking in here felt like coming home. So it's a really exciting time to be here. I agree with both of my colleagues, but I want to reframe the question. I don't think the question should be how can governments make reading essential. I think us as a society, my friend Isabel mentioned that it starts at the home. So reading to our children and forming those memories, forming that bonding moment, and reading aloud to them starts at a very young age. And then schools contribute to that with having, and then the government can also help with creating a children's library like we have here in Abu Dhabi as part of the Cultural Foundation, and introducing festivities or festivals that celebrate books and authors. So I think us as a society, it starts from the home, it starts from families, and then it grows into other elements or aspects of society, including schools, teachers, book authors. All of us have a role to play in making reading essential. As an academic myself, I can tell you that we used to think STEM, STEM, STEM. Maybe I'm biased, I'm an engineer, as you introduced me as a chemical engineer, but now we don't say STEM anymore. We say STREAM, so science, technology, reading, arts, and mathematics. So reading as an essential component of how, not only for pleasure, but also to help us grow into the different career paths, whether we want to study something in science, whether we want to study something in the arts. Reading is the language that helps us grow a hobby into one day becoming a career, no matter what career you choose. So I think all of those components have to come together.
Thank you, Dr. Ahmed. Back to you, Professor Rana. You mentioned reading, developing reading with love, and we want children to enjoy reading. How we make this happen with children? How can we make the children, especially nowadays, children are more attached to technology, iPads, PlayStation. So how can we develop that?
That's a very important question. And we need it not just in the Arab region, but across the world. Apparently, even those countries that are quote unquote developed have huge sectors of the community where the children do not love to read. It all starts by having a role model, because children imitate and emulate the people and adults around them. So the role model is a parent usually who is spending more time with the child, especially as soon as the child is born, even earlier when the mother is pregnant, that the mother and father read aloud to the child. And some parents think that, oh, but my child doesn't know how to read. How could I read aloud to them? They don't understand what I'm talking about. You must never underestimate what a child's brain is doing. How does a child learn language? They listen to your language. And if you speak very good language and you use high level vocabulary, your child will grow up to have that vocabulary because they absorb what they listen in the home. And so as you start reading aloud to the child, all these actions are absorbed by the child, whether it's holding a book, how the book is a source of fun and enjoyment, how you, as you are reading aloud as a parent, are having fun with the book. And so when you read aloud to your child, you have to be enjoying it because the child senses, are you doing this because it's just a chore and you're ticking off a box? Or you as a parent are really enjoying this book? That's why we invite parents to choose a book that they love, that they enjoy, because that feeling is contagious. And then the child starts absorbing the vocabulary and they start playing with the words, trying to understand what they mean. And that journey of trying to understand and discover, that repeats every time, because every time they think it means this and maybe it means that, is what allows those pathways of critical thinking are ingrained in the brain. So therefore, if you want to help a child fall in love with reading, you have to read aloud to the child as early as when the mother is pregnant, books in the native language, because again, the child wants to have fun, not to feel that this is a chore or homework. So it has to be in the native language, and it has to be from the everyday life of the child, meaning he or she, the child, wants to hear stories about children like them, who look like them, who speak like them, but more importantly, who run away, who pick their nose, not the perfect child. Nobody wants to hear about the perfect child. They want to hear about the child that looks like them. And that's what makes the child want to grab the book, try to make up their own words if they can't read, and it makes them revel in that feeling of enjoyment. And I'm going to just lastly touch on technology, which you mentioned. Yes, technology distracts the children. However, if a parent is reading with fun and reading on a one-to-one basis with their child, no technology can beat that, because every child wants the attention of their parent. And if they can take that from their parent, that beats any technology. And one last piece of advice: do not get your child to fall in love with reading by reading on a screen, because you cannot compete. The child already in their brain knows that the screen and the digital technology is for playing games. And you're just coming to read from a screen, you're going to lose. So no, you read in a physical human interaction, you cuddle the child, you read, and then the child falls in love with reading. And then if the child wants to use technology to access more books, there's no competition. And this is the advice of the women and men we train. And it's about human evolution. Humans evolved to be social creatures. We need that human interaction. And digital technology does not give us that. And that's why a lot of our children grow up to be stunted socially and emotionally, because they're lacking that interaction that comes from reading aloud with somebody who loves you and cares for you.
Well said, Doctor. Which brings me to another question also for you, Professor. The importance of the physical book versus the digital book or the e-book. What do you think?
So I elaborated on the importance of holding a book, smelling it, touching it. Again, this is all human evolution. We evolved across millennia to interact with physical objects, not digital screens. And we're not going to evolve in a few years, because evolution takes millions of years, to change our neural pathways. So it's all about that physical book that a child needs to encounter and feel. And you don't need a lot of books, by the way. Children love hearing the same story again and again. But it's that physical interaction that stays with the child as they grow older. But then they can transition to a digital screen. We're not against technology. It's where you start. You start with a physical book, and then you can transition to technology. And that way it'll be a win-win. But without it, we can't. And that's why a lot of international programs go around the world offering digital books. I know they have all good intention, but first of all, from a human evolution perspective, it's not going to work. Second, not everybody has technology or internet or digital connectivity, especially those who are in need. So let's just focus on the human experience. And with COVID today, we see it more than ever. There's no school. Children are at home. And so that physical connection with a parent through a book is very important, not just for their education, because when you're reading aloud, the children remains engaged with a written word that helps them go back to school when it comes back, but it also fosters that motivation to want to read and therefore want to learn and become a lifelong learner. And it helps in their mental health, because now they are talking and engaging with a parent to reduce their stress and anxiety and build their resilience. And I call this education resilience. Loving reading and therefore loving learning and changing mindsets to become, to reap the benefits of reading.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Dr. Ahmed, you are a children author. Why did you decide to write for children? What motivates you to write in this genre?
Sure. So I'm very passionate. I always, when I get asked this question, I always tell, when I go to visit schools, they ask me what made you write or why do you write for children? And I always tell people, write about what you are passionate about, whatever that topic is. For me personally, I'm a very, very proud Emirati, and I am, I love history and I love the legacy, the culture, the Emirati culture, and what our parents, grandparents have left for us. I lived 10 years of my life in the US, and I got to learn so much about the American culture because they are really good at exporting their culture. And when I came back, I work at a university, so many of my colleagues are European or American, and they used to tell me, when we go to bookstores, I want to teach my children about Emirati culture, but I can't find the material. Of course, now there are, but I'm talking about 10 years ago. So when I started writing about 6 years ago, there was very little children's books about Emirati culture written in English and produced in high quality, so hardcover, glossy paper, and so on. And what I wanted to do is the same thing that other cultures have been doing effectively by exporting their culture to us. I also want to say that many Emirati children are now very fluent in English, and it's something that we're all proud of, by being bilingual. But I also want to make sure that they are reading stories that resemble who they are, what they look like. The power of representation in media, including books, is really, really important. So I write about Emirati culture through these children's stories because I want to make sure that they learn from the legacy and the heritage that our grandfathers left for us, but in a fun way. Some of my books also touch upon my other passion, which is science, technology, robots. I am an engineer, and so even in my books, even when I talk about the Emirati culture, I always intersect that or have a sprinkle about science. So for example, I wrote a story about a race between a camel and a drone. I wrote a story about a girl wanting to become the first astronaut. This was even before the Mars mission. I always write about topics that I'm very passionate about and about topics that I think will be fun for children to read about. It's not only educational, but it has that excitement and that, the child would hopefully want to read it over and over again.
MashaAllah, Doctor. And your vision about a female astronaut become true with Noor al-Matroushi. So my question to you, Isabel, and also for you, Dr. Ahmed, because you mentioned most Emirati children are now fluent in English. And of course, Dr. Rana, you can also, would like to hear your thoughts on this. There is a challenge for some Arabic parents, and this is something I heard a lot through my career. They are facing a challenge on how what are the best methods they can adopt to encourage their children to read more books in Arabic. And I'll start with you, Isabel.
Okay, so your mother tongue, the tongue of your mother particularly, is really important, that you are grounded in your mother tongue. So it's called a mother tongue because often it is the mother who spends most time with the child and will impart her vocabulary, her way of speaking, her manners, her whole way of dealing with older people, younger people, the etiquette of your culture. If a child does not have a mother tongue,
أعتذر
whatever
لدي مشكلة في
reason,
الصوت.
they sometimes
أعتذر
find it
جدا.
difficult to
ولأي
formulate
سبب
abstract
يجد في
ideas
بعض
like
يجدوه
valor,
صعب
like courage,
تشكيل
things that you can't
الأفكار
see perhaps, but
المعنوية،
are very much part of our human
أشياء لا
nature.
يمكن أن
So
يروه،
I'm a great believer in mother
لكنها
tongue. My
جزء
mother
من
tongue is
ثقافة.
English. I
أنا
speak Arabic,
مؤمن
but the mother
باللغة
tongue, the
الأم.
tongue
أنا
that I was
لغتي
given
الأم
by my mother
اللغة
is English.
الإنجليزية. أنا أتحدث
Now,
عربية.
we are faced with a real
الإنجليزية.
challenge within, say, Gulf countries where children are not secure in their mother tongue because maybe they have help at home that are not Arabic speakers. Children are going to private schools where much of it is in English, and it's starting very early in life. So I didn't start a second language till I was 11. I just had English, and then I started learning French at 11. Now, a lot of children can cope with two languages, but not at the expense of their mother tongue. And I think English is a very invasive language, so it's everywhere. It's on TV, it's in films, it's in technology, medicine, science. All of that is quite dominated by English. And we need to turn the tide to balance out with Arabic so that a child's experience, and it is, as Professor Rana said about parents, it's a parent's responsibility to ensure their children are secure in their mother tongue. So parents don't just say this is up to the school, this is up to the teachers. It starts from before a child is born. As you quite rightly said, Professor Rana, a baby, a fetus, before it is born, recognizes its mother's voice because it's hearing it all the time. It's hearing it through the womb. So that connection is so strong, and you have to keep nurturing it. It's your language. It's probably the most beautiful language in the world, Arabic. So don't lose it. Make sure you give that gift of a mother tongue of Arabic to your children. Make sure they're experiencing books. There are some beautiful books now in Arabic. So many books are written now in Arabic. Wonderful quality. We've got a whole exhibition, a fair, full of amazing books in Arabic. So there's no excuse. And the one thing that really makes me sad is I will see a family together, the mother, the father, the children, and the mother and the father are sat there. They may be having a meal. They're doing this. They're both doing that. And the children are sat there. And there's no conversation. And this is everywhere. So please do something about your mobile phones, your technology. Put them away. Hide them. And go back to conversing and speaking together and sharing meal times. Having times where you are just without any technology, no TV on, no nothing. You will survive. Human beings have survived for a very long time without technology.
Thank you, Isabel. Dr. Ahmed.
I agree with everything Isabel has mentioned. I also want to tackle a few different, the same question from a different angle. First of all, it starts, if you're waiting for the school to do this for you, it's too late already by the age if a child goes to school. I think that parents have a responsibility to teach their children well and read aloud to them in their mother language well before they go to school. And I think it's developing habits, and not only habits, developing an environment. So something as simple as reading every night before bed, or dedicating a specific hour or a specific day. For example, Tuesday night is the night for Arabic books, and creating a corner in the library at home. This is the Arabic books library. So again, associating time, place, physical space, I think helps with the bonding, helps with setting habits, and I think that can only grow. But I also think that something that you tackled, Isabel, I think children will read the book if the book is good. Regardless of the language, there are now books which are wordless. No words, no language. If the book is well done, they will read it, and they will read it over and over again. I think events like this are really important because I can tell you myself, when I go to stores, bookstores, on a regular day when there's not big events like this, sometimes I don't find the really good quality books. So we also sometimes have a problem with this distribution. I know I'll upset a lot of the people here, but we sometimes have some problems with the distribution. Some of the better books can only be found in big exhibitions like this. They're not going to be found in stores that you might go down the road from you. So what I do, for example, during these book fairs, I make sure that I stack up for the entire year, because you have here some of the best books, not only from the UAE, but we have countries like Lebanon and Egypt and all around. So I think identifying good books and making these books available to your children is really important. And I think, like I said, the other angle is hosting for schools, for example, bringing an author in, an Arabic author. I think children also form very strong emotions if they like the author, if they went to a library that has Arabic books, making a field trip. These experiences they can associate with, and they leave very powerful memories. I remember I was having dinner at a restaurant somewhere, and I saw this kid running straight across from the hall and then coming to hug me. And I'm like, who's this kid? And she's like, you don't remember me? And the mother was running right behind her, trying to catch up with her. She's like, you don't remember me? You visited my school last year. Oh. And of course, I visit pre-pandemic. I used to visit many schools. And of course, I'm not going to remember her, but she remembered me. And I think this is not, I used to take school visits very lightly, like it's a fun thing to do, but they're very, very powerful. And I think if you make that connection with a character, with the author, with the space where you've read a book that you like, I think this can stay with you forever.
I totally agree with what you said, Doctor, about the importance of reading for children and how they remember you after, even if you don't remember them. There is a good point you mentioned, is how to identify a good book, which I'll get back to it, but I would like also to hear from Professor Rana about the same question.
Yeah, no, I'm enjoying this so much. It's amazing. It's the magic, right? The magic of loving to read. And I think that magic is what, as parents, if we feel it, it's contagious. And that's why it's not just about your kids when they're young, it's even when they grow older. If you read a beautiful passage, you can't wait to share it with the people you love, which are your children. So I keep reading to my children even now when they're grown up or adults. However, going back to the parents' role, you know, parents, they love their children, they care about them, they want them to be the best. What we need to add to the imagination of the parent is that it's not just about food, making sure they have good food, or they have good shelter, or that they have good health and you take them to the doctor for their vaccines and their checkups. Reading for fun should be equally important for the brain development of the child. I think parents don't think about that as that important. And that's why they always have an excuse. There's no time, there's no books, he doesn't sit, I'm busy. But if they really realized how important that is to brain development of their child, to have a better life and a more healthy life, emotionally, socially, and even through cognition, they will put in the time and the effort to do that. So that's important. The second point is the importance of the mother tongue, as Isabel said, because you can only dream in your native tongue. You can only imagine in your native tongue. And that's why you can only become creative and therefore a producer if you grow up loving reading in your native tongue. And on one hand. On the other hand, it's also about your identity. We have an identity crisis across the Arab world because of this problem with language. I read English, I see role models in English, and everything where success is in English. And how does this impact my identity as somebody who's Arab? I need to read in my language. I need to read about people who look like me in order to have a strong identity, to embrace the world and learn from the world, but coming from a position of confidence and power and trust in myself. And lastly, I'm going to just encourage everybody to learn as a parent how to read aloud. And we at Wheel of Reading, we have a training course for free in 10 languages now. You can just go, start whenever you want, stop whenever you want, and learn the art. If you have never been read aloud to, you learn the art of reading aloud. It's very simple and easy, and then you can practice it with your children.
Thank you, Professor. Back to you, Dr. Ahmed. You mentioned a point, a very important point, especially when choosing books. Even for us as an adults, we always go for the best-selling. We always looking for the books which won awards, and then sometimes we ended up not loving that book or stop reading it. So how to identify a good book for children?
Yeah, I think what my colleague Professor Rana mentioned is really important. I think representation matters. I think reading books that, and I'll talk about children's books specifically because that's really what I specialize in. There are two types of children's books. There is what we call mirror books. So what do you see in a mirror? You see a reflection of yourself. And that's the kind of books that I write for children in the UAE. A child wearing kandora, dealing with bullying in school, going to the farm, a girl wanting to become an astronaut so she can go to Mars because of the Mars mission. Things that they hear about, and they even the names of the characters, Saif, Fatima, Aisha. So from everything from the way they look to the challenges they face every day, it's very local. So these are mirror books, and these are important because they build character, they associate with the values, and even some things as simple as seeing themselves like, I can be the hero of my own story. I remember visiting schools and I would tell them, you know, draw your own superhero. Emirati schools. And most of the girls would draw a character that has blonde hair. No offense to blondes. Blondes are beautiful as well. And I would ask these Emirati girls, 9 years old, all of them or most of them having black hair, why did you draw a character that has blonde hair? And they would tell me at 9 years old, because blondes are more beautiful. What does that mean? It means that at 9 years old, they are already convinced that there's a standard of beauty, and they, by definition, are not beautiful because they don't have that. So it's very dangerous, and that's what I was saying, that it's important to have books that can speak to and that can see themselves in, and they can be the heroine, the hero, they can be either they or someone that they know. Now, I'm not belittling the value of the other type of books, which are window books. So what do you see through a window? Through a window, I see somebody on the other side, a different culture, a different world, and that is important too because it develops empathy. If I understand somebody who has a different background and see the world from their perspective, it also builds. So I think what we really need to have is a balance between mirror books as well as window books to be able to get the benefit of both. I will end with something very important. I think the child should also have a say in the type of book. I'm not saying be the final factor, the deciding factor, but they should have a say in what that type of book they want to read. Because every child, even at a very young age, they have hobbies. If they like dinosaurs, maybe get them a book that is related to that. Because if they enjoy the topic, they will read more and they will be inclined to listen for you to reading more about it. So I think also responding to the different child need and not assuming that every child will be the same because they all have their very own individual personalities, even at a young age. And if we look at that and try to build a library in our homes or in our schools that resembles both, like I said, window books, mirror books, as well as cater to the different hobbies and different interests of children, I think then we will be able to capture their attention. Like I said earlier on, I don't believe that children don't like reading. I think we're not exposing them to the right books in the right way.
Thank you very much. Speaking about communities, or if I can say local communities' responsibility and local entities. Isabel, as a COO of Emirates Literature Foundation, you've launched a Reading for Pleasure initiative with Ministry of Education. Can you tell us more about this initiative? What were the challenges and how was the reaction towards it from the parents, teachers and students?
Okay, just before that, I love what you said, Dr. Ahmed, about mirror books and window books. I've never thought about it like that. So in a mirror book, a child, if she is female, for example, she will see a female heroine and she will see that the person maybe has some attributes of her. And in a window book, I might see someone from a completely different age, space, place, culture. That's such a good way of thinking about mirror and window books. And then what you also said about interest. So with all of my children, I used to choose a book that I loved, and I let them choose a book they loved. Each night they would have a book each, so we'd have 2 books each for each child. Because I love reading children's books, but I had to have one that I loved, and often they would have a book that maybe I didn't love quite as much. So we would have both books, and that was a fair way of satisfying my reading desire and their reading desire. And what you said about hobbies, so my grandsons, I've got 6 grandsons, one was obsessed with trains, one was obsessed with dinosaurs, one was obsessed with whales and sharks. And believe you me, I learned more about these things than I ever knew in my life at my very old age. So they never had enough. We would read the train book again and again about the engine and the piston and this, that and the other. So there is a real desire in the 3 types of book. The mirror book, where you see someone like yourself from your culture, the window book where you're looking out on the world, and your interests, whatever they may be. That's a really important food for a child's brain and mind. So coming back to the Ministry of Education, so last year we launched the Reading for Pleasure project across from grades 1, which is 6, to grades 12, which is 18. Across all ministry schools, we've reached 260,000 students in ministry schools over this academic year. And each student gets 6 books at the end of the year. They will be the owner of 6 books, 3 in Arabic, 3 in English. All of the books selected because we believe they fall into the category of mirror, window, and interest. So we have memoirs, we have Emirati history books with lovely stories, but they all have that element of reading for pleasure. There is no exam. It's not about being tested on vocabulary or comprehension. It is about reading. And each book, coming back to your bit about the author, so for each book we have recorded a webinar of each author talking about the book, talking about the reading some of it, in some cases an audio book to go along with it, discussing the themes and answering students' questions. And for each book it's a 4-week project. So they read the book, they enjoy it, they have the author webinar, then they develop maybe some themes or activities or drawings that go around it. It's been amazing. It was a big challenge because teachers found it difficult that there was going to be no examination or testing, and we had to overcome that. Parents felt that this was a responsibility of teachers, not them to be involved in it. So we had webinars with all, and it's been mind-boggling, groundbreaking, and I think a bit like Professor Rana's wonderful project that she's doing in all these languages. You realize that all of us have a responsibility to change our worlds in whatever way we can and bring our passion and do it. So.
Thank you, Isabel.
If I can add,
yes.
One thing I did notice with the difference, I mentioned I spent 10 years of my life in the States. With Arab or with Emirati parents, the first thing we ask when our child finishes the book is like, what did you learn? And
exactly.
if they don't have a perfect answer, like we give them even as a body language, like, is that the best you can do, even though we don't say it. When I lived in the States or in the West, the first question I would hear parents ask their child would be, did you have fun? Did you enjoy it? So just to build on what you're saying, I think even the smallest hint that we as parents say, as our son or daughter, or even as a teacher, if a young student tells us that they read the book, I advise not to jump and say, what did you learn? But rather, did you enjoy the book? Did you have fun? This very simple approach in encouraging a child have a sense of achievement after ending or completing a book, I think is really, really important.
I totally agree with you, Doctor. And also, ask questions. This is my advice from reading for my nephew and nieces. Ask them questions about the characters, about what will happen next in the story. This will also help them to give you creative solutions and creative answers, and also their imagination to create another different story.
Especially open-ended questions. So it's not going to be a right or wrong question.
Or yes or no.
Open-ended questions really get the child to think about what it is, their own understanding of the story. There does not always have to be a right and a wrong.
Yeah, and believe me, they have amazing answers which will blow your mind. Professor Rana, yes, please, yes.
I just want to comment, just to continue what you're saying. And don't be intimidated. You don't even have to ask questions. What matters is to read and enjoy that experience. Because some parents think, but I don't know what to ask. And what if I ask something wrong? What if you don't have to ask even? Just enjoy it. Have fun.
Of course, of course.
Can I just say, my grandson, there is a famous children's book called We're Going on a Bear Hunt. Okay, we're going on a bear hunt. We're going to catch a big one. And then they go through the water, and it's swishy swashy and through the grass and stumble trip. Anyway, one of my grandsons could never get to the page with the cave. For 2 years we used to read it and he'd say, stop there. So we never got to it, but eventually, because he was scared of the bear, he knew the bear was coming and he wanted to get there, but he couldn't. And I respected that. I respected that he was scared of it. He still wanted. You know how we like to go on roller coasters as human beings because it scares us? He enjoyed it to a place, but he couldn't face the cave with the bear in it. So we stopped before that. Eventually, after 2 years, he used to bring the book to me, sit on my knee, and I would read it. And eventually, we managed to get to the page with the bear. And it was such fun. It's an amazing book. And the other thing I would say is that give children time to look at the illustrations. They see things that we never see because we look at the words, but they look at the illustrations. So you can't flick quickly through a book. You have to take time and look at the page, and they will point out things and see things with their amazing minds that we never see.
Of course, I also agree with you, Isabel. I have my niece, she always looking into the drawings and she pay attention that she sometimes asks me questions about the character. I can't answer, I can't find an answer. I need to come up with an answer just to convince her. Professor Rana, you also launched and developed a community-based model, We Love Reading, to encourage children to read for pleasure, which focuses on 2 training programs. Can you tell us about this initiative?
Yes, thank you for asking. So We Love Reading is the program, and what it does, it actually has an impact on a 3-prong impact. One, on the children themselves. So what we do, our goal is to motivate children to want to read for fun, to foster that pleasure. And so we train the adults to read aloud to the children in a public space. And these adults could be parents, or it could be just anybody, a grandparent, a youth, any person. And they don't have to be highly educated. All they're doing is reading aloud in the native tongue of the child in a public space, so that you don't have to rent something, you don't have to drive anywhere. It's in the neighborhood so that the child can walk to that place where it's safe. It could be a mosque, it could be a church, a community center, it doesn't matter. And what happens is that when the child is being read to in this fun way that you've all been describing, and that these adults, we call them We Love Reading ambassadors, take it from the training that we mentioned is available for anyone to take, the children fall in love with reading because they're in a space, a safe environment, not in a teacher education environment, right? Because in a school, the teacher is going to judge me, what grade is she going to give me? But when you're reading aloud with this adult, who's kind of like a substitute for the parent, we can't train every parent, but we can train one person in the neighborhood, the child is relaxed. And we tell them, if the child falls asleep or has his feet up, that's great, that means you succeeded. The child is relaxed and happy, and that's, when you have your barriers down, you absorb a lot more. And so that fun is built and that pleasure is sustained. And then we tell them, you give the children a book to take home. So that's the second part, falling in love with reading because you're being read aloud in this fun place, and then you take the book home, and then the child becomes the driver of reading in the household. And rather than the parents begging the child, come, I want to read to you, and the children don't want to come, now we flipped it. The child is begging their parent, please come and read to me. Or the child starts reading aloud to their siblings and their friends because they had so much fun listening to the reading aloud session. And we've seen through research, because we do a lot of research on our program, that the children start wanting to go to school. Not because the school is fancy or the teachers are better trained. It's because we motivated the child from the inside to want to go to school, to unlock the magic of reading so that they could have more fun. This is like basic business marketing. If you just give them books without having that fun, nobody's going to read or pick up a book. But if you've already planted the motivation, then the child will seek opportunities, will find books from wherever. So that's the first part. The second part is the adult. This person, the We Love Reading ambassador, who has trained how to read aloud and has started practicing reading aloud to their children in their home, in their community. They themselves have changed to become figuratively and literally discovering their voices. Literally because they're reading aloud, but figuratively because now as they read aloud to the children, they discover their own confidence, their own leadership qualities, and they start thinking, if by reading to the kids, I can change them, what else can I change in my community for the better? And so instead of waiting for somebody to come and solve their problems, they become change makers and solve their own problems. And that's what we all want in the end. I mean, the whole education system is about creating change makers, responsible citizens who can identify challenges and come up with solutions on their own. And so through We Love Reading, we are able to change the child, to motivate them to love to read, the adult to become a change maker. And the third impact is the community, to have a mindset of I can. Not I'm waiting or blaming a government to come and help me or a rich private sector. No, I can be the change I want to see in the world, like Gandhi said, or like Prophet Muhammad said, everyone is the guardian. كلكم راع وكلكم مسؤول عن رعيته. That we can make a difference. So that's what the program is all about, and we invite you to join us in being part of this movement, because it's been called a social movement, because it has spread to 62 countries, because it's based on shared universal human values, which is loving children, wanting to make a difference, and being respected for who we are as human beings. And because it's so flexible, just the bare framework of reading aloud in your native tongue in a public space, it's in Uganda, it's in Argentina, it's in New York City, it's in Malaysia, in Germany, and everywhere. So we invite you to join the social movement. And usually what we tell everybody, if you've heard about We Love Reading, you've caught the ball. You have to pass it on to someone else and share this information with the people around you.
MashaAllah. MashaAllah, great job, Professor. Before I will go to my last question of this session, there is a note or observation from Jane Lane. She's saying you shouldn't underestimate the value of good and interesting illustrations.
Can you repeat that?
Yeah, I'll repeat it. It's from Jane Lane. You shouldn't underestimate the value of good and interesting illustrations.
Oh, absolute illustrations. No, illustrations, picture books, up to the age of maybe 8, the illustrations are telling the story as much as the words, and you should never underestimate the illustrations in a good book. And I'm always fascinated by the connection between the writer and the illustrator, how they marry together a story and how they bring it to life in different ways. I mean, it is really, good illustrations are really, really important for children's books. And I know...
I can tell you so many stories about being an author for children's books, and then giving my work to an illustrator, having something in my mind. And if it's a really, really good illustrator, he'll take it and make it into something else. Now, something else does not mean worse, it might be even better, but it's very common for the author and the illustrator to bump heads initially. And then I've learned to respect because it's another art form, and the two art forms have to marry, the power of the word and the power of the illustrations. And honestly now, because I've been working with some of the illustrators for many years, I completely respect what they bring to the table, and even if sometimes I don't agree with how they've interpreted my story, eventually we do come to some sort of consensus. But they also have their own way of telling the story, and I've learned to respect it because it resonates in a different way with children. The way they bring my story to life is just a different art form, And so it's really interesting, and I've come to, like I said, trust some of these illustrators so much that even if it's different than what I had envisioned, I know that it's actually adding to the story another layer. Because as you've said, even if sometimes a child is not able to understand a certain word, he can pick up the feeling from the illustrations.
And the story, as human beings, all of us, for all history, we have loved telling stories. There was oral stories. So we, cave painting or how myths and legend and all these wonderful things have always been very much part of our psychological well-being as human beings. So stories, without stories, we lose our humanity in some way. We always have to have stories. We pass on news through stories. We greet people with stories. It's just who we are. And books and the ability to write and record our stories makes us human beings. So we must never lose that talent to be able to record in writing and to have those stories for our children.
I mean, as early as the caveman, I mean, how do we know about so many different civilizations hundreds and hundreds of years ago? We see some of these surviving drawings in caves and on stones and so on, and they tell the story of a civilization. They tell a story of a people that would have otherwise been lost. So it's really, really powerful. I agree with whoever made that statement.
Jane.
I'm sorry, Jane.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jane.
We have another question from Jericho. What are some other ways to disseminate information to parents about the advantage of reading aside from organizing a parents' meeting?
I think it's a really difficult one because if you are a reader, if your parents have read to you, you have that habit and you will read to your children and you pass it on. But if you come from a family where maybe bedtime stories were not part of your life, you don't have those same habits, and we do tend to follow the pattern from our parents, and that goes on. So how can we do that? So if we impress on parents that every parent wants the best for their child. So if you want the best for your child, you want your child to do well at school, you want your child to do well in exams, you want your child to have a good career, you want your child to be a good parent, you want your child to have good mental well-being and health, you want your child to be tolerant and empathetic. The answer to all of those is reading regularly for pleasure. So if you can give your child the gift of reading for pleasure, you will make their lives better. And isn't that worth doing as a parent? But it is a daily, everyday job as a parent, in the way that you put good food in front of your child, you take your child for injections, you make sure your child brushes their teeth. By the same token, read to your child, enjoy that time with your child every single day reading. And there's no shortcuts. You can't give it to anyone else. You can't hand it over to anyone else. You have to be the person that says, this is really important to me. And then it's important to your child.
Thank you, Isabel. Dr. Ahmed, we have a question, and this will be our last question for the session. And
too much pressure, Suha. You're giving me the last question?
How can, this is from Suzanne, how can I make children become reading lovers other than giving them reading sessions or rewards for reading a book?
I mean, there's so many ways, and I have to say this. I have family members. My sister is a teacher. I have to hats off for all the teachers out there. It's been a very difficult year, and teachers have impressed us over and over again by taking care of our children, even when they are not in the same room or the same premises. So I've been so impressed with some of the teachers. Some of the teachers have reached out to me in ways how they've used my books or some other books, using my books to, for example, read to their students virtually, and some of them have even uploaded book readings of my books on YouTube, and then ask their students to do their own interpretation or giving them an art project related to the book. So for example, a book could be about Eid. We just celebrated Eid, and then they read the story to them during one of their virtual sessions, and then ask them to do an art project or a crafts project or even a video of how they celebrated Eid in their own family. So you can build an entire ecosystem around reading and having post-reading events. I think you can also, one of the things that is, I think is a misconception about reading is that it's a solo activity that you read on your own and only introverts do it. And I think most people enjoy doing things in a social setting. So I think setting up a book club, of course it depends on the age group, but it's now easier than ever to have a book club. I don't think I'm the only person that enjoys, after reading a book and that I've really enjoyed, that I go to Amazon or Goodreads and spend hours reading other people's comments, message boards. I realize I'm probably a nerd, but
No, you're not.
I think there are other people. If you get the child into the social community of book lovers, that can help. And it goes also to the question you asked my friend Isabel. The parents have a responsibility, in my opinion, to read, but they are not the only ones. Brothers and sisters, and we live in a community as Arabs, we tend to live with extended families. So I had elder brothers and sisters who contributed to my upbringing. They are just, they're not my parents, but they contributed to my upbringing. And I think this is very common in this part of the world. So even if I can't read to my child, if there's an elder son or sister or a grandmother, and as we do in the Middle East, we live with extended families, all of those people can contribute to building that culture of reading. I'll end with one last thing also. One of the very few things that this pandemic has brought is the power of all this virtual things. So a lot of the book readings, for example, this very book fair, Abu Dhabi International Book Fair, has hosted me as well as other authors in the children's book program. Is that what it's called?
There's the schools program, run as part of the Abu Dhabi International Book Fair, and there are more than 270,000 students who are able to meet authors virtually and hear readings from them and talk about their books. And that's a huge excitement,
Exactly.
a huge excitement.
And it's
for
available,
authors.
so even if the parent is not able to read, all they have to do is log on. There are so many different authors, local as well as international, and they are reading these books for your children. So teachers, parents, please make use of that. There's so many resources out there that are coming out of this pandemic, and these resources are available to you, so please make use of them.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Professor Rana, in 1 minute, because we are almost done, would you like to add anything?
And I just want to share with everybody, read. The first word in the Quran as Muslims was read, iqra. And read doesn't mean just to read the letters. No, read with cognition, read with joy, read with fun, read to change yourself and change the people around you. So I ask everybody to read for 10 minutes to yourself, to the children around you, regardless who they are, and to share this love of reading, because that's your window on the world. That's how you can change the world. It's a crime for a child to grow up not falling in love with reading, to discover their inner potential and the whole world around them. And if we want to change this world for the better, not just for us in the Arab world, but for humanity, there's one little thing we can do, which is reading. So read, and that's the butterfly effect, the butterfly, it's a chaos theory in physics. I'm a scientist, I have to put science in the end. And when a butterfly flutters its wings, it moves the air 1 centimeter, but that results in a change beyond time and space that you can imagine. And so your little act of reading has unlimited consequences and impact on you and the environment and the community and all of humanity.
Thank you very much. And this brings us to our end of the session. And before we end up, I would like to thank Abu Dhabi Arabic Language Center for organizing the exhibition, the Abu Dhabi International Book Fair. I would like to thank the translators, IT team, volunteers who works behind the stage to make the session happen, our speakers, of course, Dr. Ahmed Al-Shuaibi, Professor Rana Dajani, and Isabel Abul Hawl. I hope you enjoyed this session as I did, and I hope we can do something for our children to help them developing their personalities for the future. Thank you.
Shukran. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Soha. Bye-bye, Professor Rana. See you again.